Alright, so this is a little lesson on finding roots just to warm up your brain, and then I'm going to give you the roots and you're going to write the polynomial function that they came from. So this first example right here is a review from the last video. I would like you to use your graphing calculator to find the first zero that you would like to use, factor completely, and solve for all of your roots. Go try it on your own. So let me talk about this for a minute. Once you did all of your factoring, you should end up with x plus 2 times x plus 2 times x minus 4 and x minus 7, which of course, since you had x plus 2 twice, you can just write it as x plus 2 squared. Now notice that we have a squared, which means x plus 2 happens twice. That's known as a double root. Now anytime you cross the x-axis, you know it gives you a real number or a real number solution. So it crossed right here at 4, crosses right here at 7, but when it bounces off a 0, that's when you have a double root. If it slides all the way through it, that means it is a one root. If it never crosses the x-axis, that's an imaginary root, but when it bounces off the x-axis, that is known as a double root. So when you factor, you're going to have something that looks like this. And just so you know, you only write the -2 once. You don't have to say that it's -2, because there's no point in writing it twice. Okay? So that's just a little thing I wanted to talk about. When you see a double root, it just bounces off of the x-axis. So now we're going to work backwards. I'm going to give you the root. You're going to give me the polynomial. So this really isn't that bad, because now we're just going to start working backwards. So if you think about this, this says x equals 3, this says x equals a -5, and this says x equals 2. Now remember, these are zeros. So it came from an equation that was equal to 0. So how do we get the right side to be equal to 0 again? Subtract that back over, you get x minus 3 equals 0. Add that back over to the left and you get x plus 5 equals 0. And subtract this back to the left and you get x minus 2 equals 0. So you have a polynomial that's going to come from x minus 3 times x plus 5 and x minus 2. So remember, this is your factored form. So now you're going to have to multiply this all together. So you can have an x minus 3 and then FOIL these two together. That'll give you x squared plus 3x minus 10. And then you need to multiply x minus 3 to this trinomial here. And that's going to give you a final answer of x cubed minus 19x plus 30. And all you have to do is multiply all the way back to where it came from. But since we're finding a function, do not forget your f of x equals, because we are going to write a function for this, okay? And that's it. It's backwards from what we were just doing in the problem above. In the problem above, I gave you the polynomial, you had to factor it completely, and then you had to list the solutions. Now, it's just the other way around. I give you the solutions, and you multiply until you get back to the original equation. So number 2 has an I, so it's a little bit tricky, but let's see if you can handle it. See if you can do number 2. So really the only question here is, what gives you 2i? And remember, an I comes from taking the square root of a negative. So you need to make this x squared is equal to a, well, if you square this, you get a -4. So you get x squared plus 4 is equal to 0. Put those two together, FOIL them out, and you get f of x is equal to x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 12. Okay? So, one more problem. Only trick to this is that you got a plus and minus 3, and you have a 2 plus I. See if you can handle this one, and then we will be finished with this lesson. Call me very impressed if you got this one on your own. So, you might have said that this is x plus 3 and x minus 3 equals 0. That's totally fine, because when you multiply them, you're going to get x squared minus 9 anyway. Remember, plus or minus 3 sounds like it came from a square root. Square root of what? 9. So x squared is equal to 9. X squared minus 9 is equal to 0. Here's a tricky one. You have to remember how we get these plus i's or minus i's. Usually it's a plus or minus I, but you only need one to work backwards. So this came from x minus 2 is equal to I. And then remember, this I came from a square root. So if you square both sides, it came from x minus 2 squared is equal to a negative 1. And then just work backwards. Add the 1 back to the left. FOIL x minus 2 with itself to get x squared minus 4x plus 4. Combine your like terms with the 1. You get x squared minus 4x plus 5. Take those two, multiply them out, and you get this big old final answer of x to the 4th minus 4x cubed minus 4x squared plus 36x minus 45. And if you got that, I am very impressed. If not, this is probably the area right here that tripped you up a little bit. So just remember where these come from. Just work backwards. Okay, this is Longo, and I am out. See you, bye.